Okay, welcome back. This lesson we meet what is by far the most famous and by far the most common tense in all of Biblical Greek and indeed all of Greek in general, and that's the aorist tense, the oldest tense, the most commonly used one. Okay, probably anywhere from 70 to 75 to as many as 80% of verbs will be found in aorist in the Bible. Okay, so that's statistically your best guess when I ask you on an exam to parse a verb and you're not sure about it. Write down aorist. All things being equal, 70% of the time you're going to be right. Okay, now this is where actually the Greek language turns out to be a little bit different than Latin, okay, and indeed a little bit different than English, and indeed a little bit different than most modern languages. Okay, it's actually a little more like Hebrew in this regard, and that's the whole notion of tense. Okay, up to now, and I haven't really pushed this too much, we've seen a few tenses. What have we seen so far? Well, we've seen the present, okay, and we've seen the imperfect, and we've seen the future. Now, many of you have been assuming that tense really is about time. Okay, so present tense you probably think means, well, we narrate that for something that happens in the now. Okay, imperfect, that's probably kind of something in the past, maybe some notion of not complete yet. Future, hasn't happened yet. Okay, well, you're not totally wrong if you believe that, because in fact that's usually how these tenses are used, but that's not really, in essence, what Greek tenses actually do. Okay, present tense and imperfect tense are in effect really the same thing, and both of them have the notion of ongoing action. In other words, it's not so much about when the action occurred, so much as it is the nature of the action itself being described. Okay, so if for instance I say to you luo, okay, the verb meaning loose, okay, that means I loose or I am loosening or I am freeing. Okay, it doesn't necessarily so rigidly tie me to one particular time in which I'm doing that. Okay, now I'm pointing this out because we're going to see soon enough present tense imperatives, present tense infinitives, present tense participles that don't have any clear time value, but really are there to connote ongoing action. Okay, that's really the essence of what the present tense is all about. Okay, it connotes ongoing action. Future is really the one tense that probably is tied specifically to a time value, a future time. All right, but now that brings us to the aorist, which is by far the most common tense in the Bible. The aorist usually in Biblical Greek, and indeed in Classical Greek as well, is about narrating things that have already happened. So that the typical first-year Greek student understanding of the aorist is, well, we use the aorist when we want to connote past time. Okay, and sure enough, that's often how it is used. But in fact, that's not really what the aorist is all about. The aorist, in essence, is a different kind of action. An aorist connotes simple action, usually completed action, but not necessarily complete in the sense of having been exhaustively done. But in other words, just as the present connoted a sense of ongoing action, I am loosening. Okay, if I say elusa, okay, that just simply means I loose. Okay, or I loosed, or I did loose. Okay, in other words, it just connotes more the sense that the action is simple. Okay, it's not iterative, it's not ongoing. In other words, the real difference between the aorist and the present is aspect, not so much time. Okay, now that's a little bit misleading, tricky, because usually, in fact, the aorist, since it does connote the simple fact of an action having occurred, okay, without really any sense of it being ongoing, that's usually the typical storytelling tense. Okay, so by far, the Gospels, which all relate stories about Jesus, for instance, or Exodus, which relates stories about the emancipation of Israel, you're going to see more aorist verbs there than any other single kind. Okay, that they're connoting the simple fact of action having taken place. But there are plenty of examples in biblical Greek in which aorist does not represent something in past time. Okay, for instance, I give you here the sense of Paul. Okay, see what large letters I write to you, Galatians 6:11. Okay, he uses the aorist, agorapsa. It's not see what large letters I wrote to you, but I write to you. Okay, we call this the epistolary aorist. Another perhaps even more famous example, which I didn't write here, which would be the preaching of John the Baptist. Okay, I baptize you in water. What does he say? What's the word used for baptism? It's baptisa. Okay, I baptize you in water. But notice it's not I baptized you in water past tense. Okay, that's not what he's saying. Okay, he's not speaking of past time. He's speaking simply of the fact of a simple action occurring, just in sort of a more global sense. I'm the guy who baptizes. Okay, he could have said present tense. That would mean more I am in the process of baptizing you. Okay, he could have said baptizo, but he didn't. Okay, so baptizo in that case simply connotes simple action. Okay, simple non-iterative action. That's really what the aorist is in essence. Okay, so keep that in mind. And I don't want to make this especially complicated. You know, you can kind of feel free to fall back into the default assumption that the aorist is really past tense, but in fact, just keep in the back of your mind it's more complicated than that, and get ready for more examples you're going to see of aorist having many broad uses that simply cannot be related exclusively to past time. Okay, and that's going to be even more clear when we begin to look at other types of verbal forms. Okay, you know, we have indicative forms. We're also going to see subjunctive form. We're also going to see participles. We're going to see infinitives. We're going to see imperatives. Okay, in which case it doesn't make any sense at all to think of the aorist as representing a particular time. It really only makes sense, you know, as if it were describing a particular kind of action. All right. Okay, so that's about all I want to say on this for right now. I go on to give you some more of tying principal parts to this. The aorist is simply the third principal part. Okay, so again, just as we've been doing principal parts all along, you know, you can recognize an aorist, most aorist, very easily. Okay, what's the marking of an aorist? Well, you're going to have the temporal augment for one, and in most cases, almost every aorist will also have the sigma. Okay, now we've met a few of them where the third principal part does not have the sigma, but again, for the vast majority of times, you're looking two things: augment, epsilon augment, okay, or elongation of its vowel beginning in the stem, and sigma. Okay, so those are the markings. Elusa would be our paradigm for that. Okay, etherisa for this. If I wanted to say for writing, agropsa, there the sigma is merged with a pi to make the psi letter, but again, you can still feel that the sigma in that with the augment. Okay, and there's also, I should note as well, the key for the aorist is the alpha theme vowel here. Okay, as well, that's another hallmark of the aorist. Okay, the only place you don't see that is in the third singular, which incidentally is the most common, but you do see it in every other form. Okay, so again, keep that in mind. Now, we've seen a few of them already that don't have that. Okay, so you don't have to have a sigma for it to be an aorist. Okay, think of the verb meno, to remain. Meno, menoo, emena. Okay, so again, there's no sigma there, but emena is just as much an aorist as etherisa is. Okay, and it conjugates the same way. Emena, emenas, emenen, emenamen, emenate, emenon. Okay, so again, don't freak out if you see a few of them, you know, especially those liquid stems that don't have sigmas in their aorist, their third principal part. Don't worry about it, because you will see them, but the vast majority of them do. Okay, and so they're very easy to spot. And you know, within a few weeks of translating, and I would say probably by about the middle way through the actually the beginning of the next semester, this will seem old hat to you. Okay, you'll see so many of these. All right, so again, it's just another verb form, but this case, this is an important one because it's one of the most common. Okay. All right. Well, very good. Let's stop there, and I will catch you all in the homework assignment.